Hello, and thank you for tuning into my channel this morning for my daily message of hope and inspiration. This is the day the Lord has made, and we have the privilege of rejoicing and giving thanks in it today. We're in the second day of the season of Lent, and my thoughts today are just a simple question. What do we think happens or is supposed to happen when we pray? You ever thought about that? You know, there are all sorts of books and articles and magazines that you can look at with instructions on forms of prayers and types of prayers. But what is our expectation about prayer? What do we think happens when we pray? Well, I was thinking about that this morning. I've done 2 masses today already. It's been a busy day for me at 2 different parishes. And I've been thinking about an older man that I knew many years ago in the ministry. I was a young priest at the time, and this elderly gentleman had lost his wife. Both of them were quite active in my parish, and when she died, he sort of shut down. Her death was not unexpected. She was not in good health, but when she passed away, the poor old guy just shut down. He stopped coming to church. You know, he stopped being involved in the classes, the adult classes in particular. He stopped taking care of himself, stopped eating right. It's not uncommon for people to do that when they have been married a long time, and they had been married close to 60 years, as I recall. But he stopped coming to church, and even worse, he had stopped reading his Bible and had stopped praying. And several of his friends, including I think a couple of his children, asked me to go spend a little time with him and find out how we can get him back engaged. And so I made a pastoral call to his house, and as you might imagine, this was 6 to 8 months after his wife had died. The house was not in good shape. He was not in good shape. He hadn't been eating or sleeping, had not been taking care of himself. And he'd let the house go down a little bit. And his family was worried, and the neighbors were worried, and when I got there, I was worried too. And so we went into the kitchen and were talking, and we sat around the kitchen table, and he was not really very happy. He was, as a matter of fact, he was very depressed. He didn't really want to talk all that much, and it was a struggle for him to say anything of substance. And but he said he just wasn't feeling right. Things were just not right in his world anymore. And I actually had a little moment of inspiration at that point. I'd remembered something an older priest had told me that he had done in his ministry when he was talking to people who had pulled away from church. And I actually remembered it. So as we were talking around the table, I just stood up and walked over to the counter, and you know, and I noticed he had one of those old toasters that was there, the type that you could put 2 pieces of bread in and plug it in and turn it on, and it would come out 2 minutes later as toast. And I went over to it and sort of looked at it, and I noticed that it wasn't plugged in. It hadn't been used apparently in a while. And I looked at it, and I pushed the handle down and looked at it and looked inside of it, pushed the handle down some more, and I made a comment to the old guy. I said, "Your toaster doesn't work. It's broken, totally broken." I said, "I'm trying to get it to come on here, and it's just simply not coming on." And he looked at me and furrowed his brow and said, "Well, Father, you haven't even plugged the dang thing in yet." And I said, that's what happens when things get unplugged from their power source. Prayer is our way of plugging into our power source. So what do we think happens? We plug into the timelessness of eternity is what we do. We make contact with a God who loves us. We open up the treasure trove of spiritual energy and power that's available to us. We plug into the angels and archangels and all the company of heaven who sing God's praises and surround us all the time. And we get a glimpse of eternity when we pray. It's not an idle, passive, or unimportant thing. Prayer makes spiritual things happen. And whether we're praying individually, all by ourselves, and whether we're in a group, a prayer circle, prayer group, a rosary group, it doesn't really matter when we're at church and we pray as a community. We plug into the power source of heaven when we do that. and our expectations should be lofty. We shouldn't treat it as a passive thing that never produces results. Prayer produces results. Prayer changes things, starting with us, because we're the ones who generally need to be changed. Prayer doesn't and is not our attempt to try to manipulate God. No, that would be foolish on our part. Prayer is a way to let God change us, starting with our hearts, when we plug into our spiritual power source. About 25 years ago, about the same time as I was ministering to this elderly gentleman, I wrote a series of songs and copyrighted them, and my wife Dixie and I actually did a couple of CDs on them about the things that were going on beneath the final week, Holy Week in Jerusalem, and the title of these songs was an album called Beneath the Final Week. And in one of them, a couple of them, I was exploring Mary Magdalene and the pain she was going through on that Holy Saturday after Jesus was buried, that long, painful day on Holy Saturday before the day of his resurrection. And I was capturing her pain, and in my mind, I saw her drowsing and sort of falling asleep at night and waking up on Easter morning, and everything had changed. In Mary's words, while we were crying all alone, angels from heaven moved the stone. Plug into your power source today and enjoy the riches and the power of heaven. It'll transform everything, starting with you. And remember that you're precious to the Lord and that He loves you. God bless you. Have a wonderful day today.